Welcome back to my channel for a new Leica episode, and this episode is about the new firmware 4.0.0 of the Leica SL3 and the Leica SL3-S. And just recently I posted my fully fledged tutorial on this new firmware with the same numbering. It's actually firmware 4 for the Leica Q3, the Q3 monochrome and the Q3 43. And if you have not seen this episode, I'll post the link down below in the info box so you can look this up. And now it's all about the SL system. So the system cameras from Leica. And I have here my Leica SL3 Reporter Special Edition and the Leica SL3-S. And I'm going to quickly update the firmware on both cameras, and then I walk you step by step through the changes in firmware 4.0.0. Let's kick this off. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, stay tuned on my content, support my work. Many thanks for that. All right, in my recent video about firmware 4 for the Leica Q3 cameras, I actually showed the update process via downloading the firmware file from the Leica website, placing it on the SD cards of the 3 Q3 cameras I showed in the video back then, and then starting the update process. Here I want to do it via the Leica Fotos app, and I have here just reconnected my Leica SL3 Reporter, and I want to show you the process now on my iPhone 17 Pro Max. So I say here enable for time sync, geotagging I also want to enable, and then we have cable connectivity for faster transfer. Use the USB-C cable to connect the camera. Not necessary here, and it will connect also via Wi-Fi. No problem at all. And then if I go back to the start screen where it says Leica SL3, it automatically gives me a notification here that there is an update available. So let's click on that, and it says firmware version 4.0.0. It gives me all the changes, improvements, everything I want to know. I can download this now, and you get a progress bar here. And when the downloading is done, I can basically install it on my Leica SL3 Reporter. After downloading is done, it says here connecting to camera, and you also see this here on the display of the Leica SL3. It says connecting to Leica Fotos, and then we should in a moment be able to update the installation file here and get the new firmware into the Leica SL3. Connection successful. It says transferring now. This goes fairly fast. Although I don't have USB-C cable connected between camera and iPhone here. And in a moment we see here firmware update in progress. The camera is updating its firmware. And that's the process how to do it via the Leica Fotos app. It's pretty flawless and works really well. And it doesn't bear the risk of getting the wrong firmware file on the camera. I gave this warning in my recent video when I updated and explained the firmware for the Leica Q3 cameras that you should not mess up firmware files and, for instance, get a Leica Q3 28 firmware into a Leica Q3 43. I still don't know if it works. I never tried, but if it would work, it would definitely mess up the camera. If you connect the camera with the Leica Fotos app, then you have, of course, not that risk, because there is a one-on-one connection between the phone and the respective camera, and it will always pick the correct firmware file. And that's the big advantage here. Here it says now to start the firmware update, please follow instructions on the camera. But we see it's already started, firmware update in progress. So I can say okay here and can, for the time being, put my iPhone here away. And on the camera, we see it's in progress, and very likely it will be completed very soon. And then we probably need to restart the camera. Okay, so the update process is done. It says, please restart the camera. So let's press and hold the on-off switch, switching the camera off, which happens now. And then we can switch it on again. Here we go. Camera is off. You see top display is nothing visible any longer. Let's switch the camera on. And let's see what we get. Here is the same message as what I showed in my previous video on the Leica Q3 cameras for the Q3 28 and for the Q3 43. We got the same message. and it says security update installed. Please pair your device again. That is a novum, which has to do with a European regulation that you need to repair the camera with the Leica Fotos app, which I'm going to do in a moment. Let's go here to continue. Set up your camera via Leica Fotos app within a few seconds. So let me get my iPhone prepared. Let's go to the Leica Fotos app. And here it says then new pairing required. So we go into that and it is searching for the camera. New Bluetooth pairing required. The update is compliant with the latest European Union standards. To complete the firmware update, we need to establish a new Bluetooth pairing. And that is what I'm going to do right now. And then after a while, it says here in the Leica Fotos app connected. It also says on the camera here, all done. Camera has been set up automatically. I can press done here. And then we can continue in the Leica Fotos app. What I want to do now is I want to look what Leica Looks I have here, since this is connected. And there is a new look here, by the way, which is called Silver. I think that's a fabulous one. Let's say transfer to Leica SL3. Transferring. That's super fast now. And it is already transferred to the Leica SL3. Let's go back. Let's see what else we have. I think Bleach is interesting. Greg Williams is definitely interesting. Let's transfer it to the Leica SL3. Transfer successful. Look how fast this is now. And this is one of the features they actually promise in the firmware update on both camera platforms, the Q cameras and DSL cameras. The connection to the Leica Fotos app is much, much quicker. Teal, transfer to Leica SL3. Transfer successful. Let's go back. Brass is definitely something I like. Here it always says on the camera, by the way, transfer complete. And that is a message you get as confirmation from the camera. Let's see what else I want to have here. Chrome, not really. Eternal, I like a lot. Transfer successful. Contemporary, classic. What else do we want? I think we take classic here. Transfer. Transfer successful. Contemporary. And then it says, and I showed this message several times on my channel, the Leica Looks storage is full and I need to free up and make some space if I want now here also the contemporary look. I think I'm good for the time being with the Leica Looks, but you see the connection is flawless. The transfer of the Leica Looks goes very, very fast and everything feels very, very snappy if I work with the Leica Fotos app here. For the time being, that's it on the Leica Fotos app. I wanted to show you how to update it. I will also update in the same way my Leica SL3-S. And I will not show it here in the video because it's exactly the same. The release notes for the firmware 4.0.0 are also exactly the same for both cameras. These camera platforms are kind of the same. We have here a lower resolution sensor, of course. Here we have the higher resolution sensor. And I will cover that in the course of the video, of course, and mention the multi-shot mode, which was there from scratch on the Leica SL3-S, is now also on the Leica SL3 with an insane high resolution. But more to come in the course of the video. Just as a side remark, you see now here my SL3-S is also updated. I need to restart the camera and I will do it. Switch it off for the time being. As I said in the release notes, in contrast to the Leica Q3 cameras, where we had sections distinguishing, for instance, between the Leica Q3 monochrome and the Q3 28 and 43, we have here one unified document for both of these cameras. So I do not need to walk you through the SL3-S. I will do everything on the SL3. A second side remark, I still have here the Lumix S-Lens 24-105 on it, which is also a macro lens with a magnification of 50%, so 0.5 to 1. And I'm still experimenting with that lens. So far, it's pretty promising. I think this is a really good alternative to the native Leica lenses as an always-on lens or a zoom lens, if you want a zoom lens and not go with primary lenses only. And I will very likely in the next couple of weeks post a review about this lens. Hope it interests you and you gain some insights for your own purchase decisions. It's a pretty affordable lens and so far the image quality looks really promising to me. There are two things I want to check in the camera menu now. One is here in the firmware, whether we really have the correct firmware now. So let's go to camera information. And here we see it's firmware 4.0.0 now. And the second is a bit more exciting. I didn't store before my user profiles again. And I assume, but I didn't find an explicit hint on it from Leica. I assume that in the same way as now on the Leica Q3 cameras, the firmware update is preserving the user profile. So I hope they are still there. I'm sure I have it on some SD card somewhere, but it would be tedious to set up the camera from scratch again after I posted a longer video about my new setup on this camera, where I will also post a link down below in the info box. So let's quickly check that. Let's go into user profiles and let's see what we got here. So here we have the user profiles. Let's go into that menu and let's see. We have it all here. You see, I have 3 profiles which I set up before the firmware update some time back, and where I posted a video about it. We have still images, people and tripod. That's are my 3 profiles here on the Leica SL3, which I distinguish from the way I set up my Q3 cameras, because here I have much more customizable function buttons, even here on the front side of the camera body. And that's why I use on the Leica SL platform a different approach than I use it on the Leica Q3. But the convergence of the firmware, the menu structure, everything I explained just, I think, recently in my video about firmware 4.0.0 for the Leica Q3 cameras makes it very, very easy to switch instantly between the Q platform and the SL platform. And since I own both cameras, I also switch very often between these 2 cameras. The first new feature we find in the firmware release notes is the camera to cloud FRAME.io connection. And that is something very interesting. So for those of you who don't know what FRAME.io is, it's actually a cloud-based collaboration platform for creative teams. And that applies to video professionals, but also photographers. And it's a platform where you can centralize your project files, which typically concerns footage, to streamline review, feedback, and all of that. And that platform belongs to Adobe. And we are well aware that Leica has strong bonding with Adobe, because you have these integrated metadata approaches for perspective control, for instance, which goes flawless into Lightroom Classic and Lightroom. And I think there was even a time whenever you purchased a Leica camera, you got actually a free license for Lightroom from Adobe. And here they go one step beyond. And FRAME.io is a platform which a lot of professionals in the film industry and in the photography business actually use for collaboration. Where do you find this in the camera? Well, instead of Leica Photos as a menu entry, you have now a new menu entry which is called Connectivity. And if you go into that, you have basically 2 options. You have the Leica Fotos app and you have FRAME.io. And if you go to FRAME.io, you can now set this up and connect to your profile and all of that. And in this way, you can integrate FRAME.io in a very smooth way into your workflow. What is a caveat is you cannot simultaneously use FRAME.io and the Leica Fotos app. So you have to make a decision here. But I think that is something which is acceptable for most users of FRAME.io. And that's the way we find it. New menu item, Connectivity. And there we find both the Leica Fotos app, which is what so far used to be the connection between the camera and the rest of the world. And then you have FRAME.io, where you can set this up. The next new feature I want to live demonstrate here is consistent with what I showed on the Leica Q3 cameras, and that concerns the Leica Looks. And if you go into the menu, we find here the Leica Looks, and it typically starts with standard. And if we go into standard, for instance, we can adjust them. And you see we have here a bunch of options. I can just scroll through them. So here we have contrast, highlight, shadow, sharpness, and saturation. And that is what we have under the pre-installed Leica Looks. Let's take another example. Let's take Vivid here. And you see we have the same options here. I can scroll through them and can adjust them with the joystick in the horizontal direction. Now, for the Leica Looks, I just uploaded to the camera. And you remember I took, for instance, silver, or let's take here Greg Williams, which is a black and white style. If we go into that, I can only delete it. I cannot tweak it. It is what it is, and very likely bound to what Greg Williams as a famous photographer wanted to see in that look. So we cannot tweak this here. And if we go to, let's say, silver, I think that's the newest one, which I just installed. You watched me live installing it. If we go on that, we have the adjust option, but we can only tweak intensity. You see, there is no vertical scrolling here. We can tweak the intensity, have it elevated to 100% or make it less elevated, like here to 60%, what have you. And so there are certain options available or not available depending on what Leica look you here have. In the same way as, for instance, when you distinguish between monochrome looks and color looks, of course. But you have more optionality here now, and you can tweak your Leica looks in the way you like them most. And intensity, of course, is a very useful feature because that means you can give the look, for instance, let's go here back to teal maybe, or let's go to eternal. I can use that look, but if I don't want it to be super elevated, I just make the intensity a bit smaller. That's the way it works. A major change, which a lot of Leica shooters will appreciate, is that the Leica SL3 and the SL3-S have a completely revamped autofocus system. And I explained this in detail for the Leica Q3 cameras. And I will make it here for those of you who have seen this video already, quick, efficient, and effective. And for those of you who have not seen it, I will nevertheless make sure that you get the main points. So first of all, there is in the menu, if we go into the first page of the menu, we have here a streamlining going on in autofocus mode. Field and spot have been integrated into one mode. Zone and multi-field have been integrated into one mode. And then there is tracking, which is also on the Q3-28 and Q3-43, but not on the Q3 monochrome, because there is no tracking feature on the monochrome Q3 based on hardware limitations coming from a monochrome sensor. And then in addition now, they have a new menu entry here, which is called autofocus detection. And that can be switched off, and it can be set to human, eye, face, body. Then we forget about the body, have only eye and face for humans. And then for the very first time, animal is no longer in beta mode, but we have animal body and animal eye and body, which you will appreciate if you are shooting cats, dogs, other animals. And it's also trained based on AI algorithms and tons of data for different categories of animals. And that applies to the whole revamping of the autofocus system. Leica has retrained the tracking and the subject detection algorithms for better performance. And that is something I will definitely try to find out in the field when I shoot this camera. And I just for the time being have to believe that it is more effective and much more reliable than what we had before on Leica SL cameras. And it will very likely also turn this camera now into a fully fledged, finally suitable camera for sports and action. You could always use it for sports and action, but it was not as well working as in some other camera brands, like for instance in the Nikon C system or the Sony Alpha system. All right, so that's autofocus detection. For me, this new menu entry, autofocus detection, is such an important new feature that I want to have quick access to it. Now, I already have assigned functions to all of the mechanical elements here, which are available, customizable buttons, what have you. So for the time being, I placed it actually in the soft button menu here in the control screen. It's here. If you look here, it's off, and then you have the usual suspects I just talked about. And in this way, I have quick access, but I will rethink where I can best place this feature for quick access. Because for the time being, I have, for instance, on a customizable button at the front side, I have my autofocus mode with these new streamlined 3 options: field, spot, zone, multi-field, and tracking. And I want to have the same quick access to autofocus detection in the future. For the time being, it's sitting here on the control screen. Now, I have placed Yennefer and The Witcher here in front of me. I want to very quickly give you a complete download in an effective and efficient way, hopefully, how this all works. Those of you who have seen this already in my Q3 video, forgive me. I want to keep this video here self-contained, so I will quickly talk about it, but I will make it in a very fast way. And hopefully those of you who have not seen the Q3 video will nevertheless get the important takeaways. All right, so here is my focus field. By the way, I center this back with the FN button. That's part of my customization. I currently have it on The Witcher. And let's now activate autofocus detection. Let's go into the control screen. Let's go here to human, eye, face, and body. And then it immediately detects the witcher's body. And that only works because the focus field is placed on the witcher's body. Focus metering happens exclusively in the focus field, or if I go into the menu here back, in the zone where you currently place it on the frame in the live view of the camera. And that is something which you need to bear in mind. Let me quickly demonstrate this. If I move the focus field away from the witcher, body detection will stop. It stopped. You see, if I move it over to Yennefer, it detects Yennefer's body. And all the focus metering is happening exclusively in that small rectangle here, which is the focus field. Now I can resize this, make it bigger or smaller. And here you see the integration with the former spot autofocus mode. This is spot. This is the smallest field, second smallest field, or let's call it medium size and large size. And also here, if I move to Yennefer's body, it will detect Yennefer's body. If I move to the Witcher and just touch it, see, I'm only touching here the arm of the Witcher, it will immediately recognize the Witcher's body, and I can get his body sharp and in focus. That's the way it works. Let's now change the setting from eye, face, and body to eye and face only. So let's go here to eye and face. And now if I go to the Witcher, for instance, it will not recognize anything, and the same for Yennefer. And this is due to the same principle what I said before. The focus field is the area where focus metering happens. I have to move this to touch on Yennefer's head, and then you see immediately, in a very, very snappy way, it finds Yennefer's face and the eyes. And in the same way, it would find the Witcher's face and eyes. And with the joystick and a horizontal movement, I could also switch between the eyes and faces of different subjects in the scene. Let's change this now from spot and field to zone and multi-field. I use my customized function button here on the front side of the camera, which brings me up the menu. So we go here to zone and multi-field. And you see I get here a zone indicated by diagonal white lines. I can also here resize this if I want, can make it bigger, or for the full frame, can make it smaller. Let's keep it small for the time being and the illustration. And the same principle applies if I go here to human, body, eye, face. The moment in time it touches on the Witcher, I get his body recognized. And if I move over to Yennefer, it gets her body recognized. And the same applies to the eye now. If I switch off body recognition and go here to eye and face, and I go back to Yennefer and move up here, and it touches the face, you see only with one diagonal line here, it immediately finds her face and the eyes. And as I said before, and I demonstrated this, by the way, in my Q3 firmware update video, I can toggle between the Witcher, Yennefer, or even more subjects in the scene in a very easy way with a horizontal movement of the joystick. Summarizing what we have so far, there are two major changes. The first one is under autofocus mode, that's streamlining. We have field and spot now integrated, zone and multi-field integrated, and we have tracking. And then we have an additional menu entry which is called autofocus detection, and that can be deactivated. And we have two options for humans and two options for animals. And of course, if we have more than one subject in the scene, as I demonstrated in my Q3 firmware update video, we can toggle between different subjects with a horizontal movement of the joystick. Let's talk now about tracking. And I already have here autofocus continuous activated for a while now, and I have this on a customizable function button. You see here I can go to intelligent autofocus, which I never touch. I don't need it, I don't want it. Autofocus single, of course, and then autofocus continuous. And let's go into tracking, but deactivating autofocus detection. So let's go here to off. And let's activate tracking. And I have this on this customizable front side button. So let's go here to tracking. And let's place that tracking field on Yennefer, and let's see what happens if it tracks Yennefer. And you see it becomes very lively already, but it doesn't recognize anything. It's also hunting for the background. So if I really want to track a human person, then I should activate here autofocus detection. So let's go to body, eye, face detection. And you see then it immediately is detected. It even goes to the eyes and the face here. And now I can track. And let's live demonstrate this. I'm standing up here from my chair. I keep half pressing the shutter button. I move Jennifer, and you see this gets very, very sticky on Jennifer. And in this way, I can track people, but also if I'm in animal detection, I can track animals, what have you. Autofocus tracking based on new AI database training has been massively improved. And what I want to show you is how it's tracking Jennifer, losing tracking of Jennifer because she will be hidden behind a wooden box, and then how the tracking picks up on her again when she moves from the left-hand side of the frame to the right-hand side of the frame. And let's do this by, first of all, getting the tracking field placed on Jennifer. Then let's half press the shutter button and keep pressing. And you see Jennifer is now in focus. We move her behind that wooden box, and then it comes up here and the focus field is still sitting on her. Look at that. Absolutely amazing, isn't it? That is something we have not seen before. Jennifer was for about a couple of seconds behind that wooden box, and when she crossed from the left-hand side of the frame to the right-hand side, her eyes and her face were still tracked. And although she was hidden for a while, it's still working. Let's do this again because it's so much fun. And then I will conclude my autofocus tutorial here because I think you have seen what you need to see. Let's move Jennifer again. The tracking is now working on her face and her eyes. Let's move her. She's hidden. Here she comes again inside in the left-hand side of the frame, and the focus field is still sitting on her face. Absolutely amazing. Leica did a really great job here in improving tracking and the autofocus system. I hope you enjoyed that demonstration, and I hope you find it as impressive as I find it. Of course, we've seen this in other camera systems from other brands. And the Sony Alpha series, for instance, the Nikon C series, the Canon RF series, they are well known for having this feature for a longer time, but we have not seen it on Leica cameras. And even if Jennifer is for a while hidden behind something, the focus and the tracking will pick up on her again as soon as she becomes visible again. And that is absolutely amazing. A total novum in the Leica system camera world. And it works in the same way, by the way, on the Leica Q3 cameras. I've not shown it in the video and just made a sloppy remark that I need to test the tracking feature out in the field. But here I wanted to live demonstrate it so you can appreciate it and enjoy it. Let's reset here. Let me get here back to field. And let me also go back here to autofocus single. And let's see where the focus field is. Here it is. Let's also make it smaller again. For still images, I typically like to have this in the smallest size. Not spot, you remember that integration, but small. Let's place it on Jennifer's body. Let's also get, for the time being, the autofocus detection off. And let's look into the other features we get with this new firmware 4.0.0. A feature which will be appreciated by pro videographers is compensation profiles for anamorphic lenses. And if you use an anamorphic lens, you have a certain squeeze factor coming from the optical construction of the lens, but you want to see it in the correct way in the live view of your camera. And you can now set this up in the camera settings, and I'm going to show you this quickly. If you are a videographer, you will very likely appreciate that because that helps you a lot getting the correct preview in the correct aspect ratio on the live view of the camera. You can easily correct now the image compression coming from anamorphic optics in the camera menu. You have this under camera settings, and for me it's currently grayed out here because I have an L-mount lens from Panasonic on the camera. And if this would not be grayed out under lens profiles, you can actually correct this and find the correct parameter for the anamorphic lens you're using on the camera. Being in camera settings, there is another update here which I want to quickly show you. Let's go to display settings, and in display settings we have the LCD frame rate, and if I go into that, I can now switch here between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second. And the lower it is, in this case, you have the option to go to 30 FPS. That will reduce power consumption because the most power hungry items on this camera are the EVF and the LCD. On the frame rate for the EVF, we have what we had before, no change here. We can go to 120 frames per second for a very smooth flow of information going through the EVF, or we can go to 60 frames per second. For me, I said this a couple of times on my channel, 60 FPS is plenty, is enough for me. I don't have any lagging or feel any lagging if I shoot in that. And if I would go to 120, my battery would run out of power earlier, and that's not what I want. But I mentioned this in a couple of other videos and tutorials on my channel. New really is the LCD frame rate, and you can go here to 30 FPS, which I will certainly do. Staying in the camera settings for a moment, in the same way as on the Q3 cameras, we can now also check the health of the battery. And you see here a new menu entry, which is called battery condition. And you see here, it basically says very good. There is not more I can choose, no matter how often I press the joystick. And then if you would use the hand grip, this is grayed out currently. You can also check the health and condition of the battery, which you use in the hand grip, which extends your shooting experience, of course. A big change and big improvement where I personally know that a lot of people waited for, including myself, is that we have a new option under drive mode now. And let's quickly go here to the corresponding setting. And here we have drive mode, and then we have single, which is currently checkbox, continue shooting, interval shooting, exposure bracketing. And finally, we have multi-shot here. And then we have the usual settings, which we know from the Leica SL3-S. And finally, it's here, and you get an insanely high resolution of 241 megapixel with one frame. And the cool thing, the absolutely cool thing about Leica is that the processing happens in camera. And what is also remarkable is that you can go for handheld shooting here. You see, you have tripod, handheld, and the camera is then compensating via the in-body image stabilization for tiny shakes and vibrations. So you can do this handheld, and you can do it on a tripod, which is always the more safe method. And if you are on tripod, look at that, you get a grayed out menu entry coming to life, and that is the motion artifacts correction, which is also great. So I personally think the multi-shot mode on the Leica SL platform was always one of the most mature approaches to pixel shift multi-shot, and here it has been further improved and finally also implemented for the Leica SL3. And I remember back then when I posted my introductory video on the Leica SL3, a lot of people expressed their disappointment that multi-shot is not included any longer, and now you get it with 241 megapixel. How great is that? Before I give you a quick collection of other improvements, which are probably minor for most of you, let me show you one more feature which I predicted in my video back then when I introduced the Leica Q3 monochrome on the channel and talked about the consolidated file format menu. And it is here. We go into file format, and instead of having two menu entries now where you choose the combinations between DNG and JPEG and then the different size combinations via a separate menu, it's all in one menu now, unified. You have here LDNG, medium and small, and then you can toggle between all possible combinations of sizes of DNG and JPEG files. And for me, this is always LDNG and LJPEG. JPEG only for a quick preview on my MacBook Pro, whether I like the image, and then the post-processing happens exclusively in the DNG file, the RAW file, which I shot in that particular shooting situation. But that is convenient, and I mentioned it in my video back then that I personally expect this, which was there on the Leica Q3 monochrome before it came to the SL platform, to also take place on SL cameras. And then if you want to study the release notes yourself, there are improvements on video formats. You know, there are improvements in terms of warnings concerning the battery if you have the wrong battery included, because smaller capacity batteries also fit into the Leica SL3 body, or if the battery is depleted, all these kind of things. Improvements in the firmware which make the workflow even smoother and the shooting experience even better. And I think that's all I wanted to say to that. What I will do, of course, and I want you to stay tuned to see this, because this will be exciting. If you go here to drive mode, I will, of course, make a dedicated video about the new multi-shot, which is now included here based on pixel shift in the Leica SL3. Finally, it used to be on the Leica SL3-S, I think with 96 megapixel before. right from scratch when the camera was introduced, but on the SL3 I missed it and now it's here. So I will make a short dedicated video about that, and we will all together look into the image quality of these in-camera processed frames which have 241 megapixels. All right. That's it. That's all I wanted to say and show. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.